Welcome to the DGD podcast. As always, the NCDGD himself, Robert Reynolds. Today we're talking Oregon. It is game week. We saw some week zero games, so college football is in full effect at this point. But today we're talking those Oregon Ducks. And nobody better to talk about Oregon with us than our friend Day from Addicted to Quack. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. You were kind enough to come on our show, Robert, and it's nice to make the return trip for you.
It's always fun to do these home and homes, right? I
Yeah,
think
you bet.
let's just say you can learn a lot about these things, which I think that is the plan for today. Obviously, listen, if we have any Duck fans in the chat, welcome to the brigade. All right, welcome to the brigade. If you're new and you don't know what that means, that is our live chat section. Listen, feel free to ask questions, things like that. We are a show that drives off of questions as well. We will read them, and obviously, if they are appropriate, so keep that in mind. But neither here nor there. Obviously, we welcome this debate here. But today, I think from a Georgia perspective, man, I'm ready to learn about Oregon. Uh, and before we start, let's give a shout out to our friends over at Alumni Hall. Alumni Hall, obviously, 10 minutes from campus, licensed Nike, Cutter and Buck, Columbia, you name it, all types of good stuff, right? Georgia gear and everything. So if you're in the market for some Georgia gear, hey, go to Alumni Hall, check them out, or www.alumnihall.com. Give them a shout out. Let them know DGD sent you. With that being said, let's jump straight into this. Obviously, you know, you lose Mario Cristobal, right? You bring in Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning, obviously a familiar face with Georgia fans. I'm not going to beat the dead horse there. It makes too much sense. You know, what are y'all's? I want to get a feel for Oregon's pulse of the program, if you will. Like, what's the overall vibes? What's the overall feeling throughout the season? Leading up to the season in Eugene. What's the feelings like there?
I would say it's pretty good. Oregon fans are divided. I guess I'd say that politely on the legacy of Mario Cristobal as Oregon's head coach. But I think it's undeniable that he left a pretty full stocked cabinet in terms of talent. There's offense and defense. I think it is looking like a more talented team than Oregon has ever had. You got to remember, I know that Oregon's been in the spotlight, for a minute here, but like a lot of Oregon fans are old enough to remember about a 20-year period in the 60s, 70s, and 80s where it was the idea that Oregon would be playing on a stage like this is just inconceivable for fans of a certain age. So this will probably be the most talented team that Oregon has. I did an entire series, running down the brand new coaching staff. 100% of the coaches are new. I really like, especially on the defensive side of the ball, really seems like Lanning assembled, a really philosophically coherent staff of guys. It wasn't just like grab the best position coach that I think is available. It's like, assemble dudes who all know how to work together within this sort of mint front, tight front. They all have experience. For example, Baylor's safeties coach, Matt Powledge, right, who's working under, Dave Aranda, and like that's, the tight front, sort of the originator of this defensive scheme. And on the offensive side of the ball, I am excited to find out what Dillingham is going to do. It's a bit of a mystery schematically, given that we've never really seen what Dillingham has done out on his own. But I'm sort of expecting from film study on the guy that it's going to look pretty similar to the previous staff's, RPO heavy attack the linebackers type of offense, and that's probably a good fit for the returning personnel they have. The offensive line has been a bulwark of Oregon for a long time. That's probably not going to change. They're returning all 5 starters. In my opinion, the team ought to go down as their quarterback goes down, which is still a big fat question mark right now. We're going to find out on the 3rd, I think. How that is going to go, and by extension, how the rest of the season is going to go. But I'm excited to find out.
Absolutely. I think when from a Georgia perspective, right? When y'all took and hired Lanning, right? And I've been even Friday. You know how I felt about this. I thought Lanning did it exactly the right way. Obviously you take, obviously become head coach, but then continuing to coach Georgia, right, and getting us to where we need to be, ultimately winning the title, whatnot, right. So I have the utmost respect for Lanning, and I look at his staff, right. I think you look at Tosh Lapoy, it's more so the coordinators here, Tosh Lapoy and Dillingham. I think it's an interesting culmination of minds, right. I think so, right, because we saw what Dillingham was able to do, right, and we're going to get into the player personnel wise here in a little bit, but we saw what Dillingham was able to do at Auburn and Florida State and things like that, right? And it's interesting, right? So obviously as the season progresses, right? Obviously the first season you have some time to learn some things, right? Understand the personnel, rotate, find things like that, right there, and that's I think that's expected, right? Because it's expected on our side as well, right? It happens every season, But for me, listening to the Oregon space, right, in a sense, like I don't even know if I've heard y'all happier now than I feel like it's been happier than any time under Cristobal, obviously I can't speak on 100%, but I feel like that's a testament to the culture that he's bringing immediately. If Would that make sense?
Well, I guess I put it this way: a lot of Oregon fans were disappointed with quarterback performance in the 4 years of Mario Cristobal. I mean, I certainly was too. Uh, and anytime you have an opportunity, where you have both a quarterback change and a staff change, um, you're always going to be optimistic. Hope springs eternal. Um, I think there's good reason to believe that Oregon's going to get better quarterback performance going forward. But we're just not going to know until the third. That's going to be the exciting thing about this game. Um, I sort of think I know what to expect when I'm watching when Georgia has the ball and Oregon is defending it. I'm not like I'm making a prediction exactly what the outcome is going to be, but I know what the scheme is going to be on both sides of the ball. I know who the key returning pieces are. I know the questions that they have to answer and how they're going to attempt to answer them. On the other way around, though, when Oregon has the ball and Georgia is defending them, it's a new quarterback, and as you know, Georgia's replacing quite a bit in their defensive front, and in the secondary, as well. And like, oh boy, you know, it's going to be really fun to find out how those questions are answered.
Obviously in the chat here we kind of see like we re-emphasizing, right, Landing and staff really, and it's what Mikey G says here, and I'll pull it up, is this talking about Oregon fans as we are too, being excited or fond of the new coach and everything. Seems like a great guy, obviously hasn't coached a game yet but have high expectations for what we've seen. Just speaks to the caliber of folks you guys have. Glad he chose us. Yeah, listen, I think you look at least my following, right. I think we have this sentiment towards Lanning. We understand how good of a coach he is, right? But at the same time, right, when it comes to September 3rd, I think Oregon fans here will agree on this. It's going to be one of those things where it's a mutual. I hate you for today, and afterwards, good luck, right? Um, and I feel like that's the pulse of the program right now, right? Leading up into the season, right? We saw week zero, things like that, right? And listen, I think I'll probably speak for myself, but I mean, if you feel free to add on to this, I'm gonna speak on behalf of the brigade. I'm sure that seeing week zero, seeing all these games, made us that more excited for Saturday. As simple
Oh,
as that.
definitely. Oh yeah, my blood was definitely up. I don't care at all about Nebraska and Northwestern, but I suddenly like was eating, drinking, sleeping purple and red. Yeah, college football gets in your blood, doesn't it?
Welcome back. We're talking personnel, right? I want to talk about some personnel on the Oregon side. Um, you know, I think you look at foe for Oregon in the Pac-12, USC. They I don't know how to feel about this, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. But I felt like Travis Dye, probably a name that resonates with Oregon fans more so than Georgia fans. But
Mm.
Travis Dye going to USC, right? I feel like that was a key departure. Um, I mean, there was a couple key departures that I know of, that I'm aware of, right? But I think that was the main one, because if I'm not mistaken, you had your two running backs depart, and then you had Robbie Ashford if I go to Auburn, if I'm
Yep.
not mistaken. What were some? So I guess my question is, what were the key departures that that we need to be aware of? Because I felt like last season the guys that did leave made an impact, and it's going to change how Oregon looks from this past season into this season currently. Who were some key departures outside of the aforementioned Travis Dye?
Well, CJ Verdell, as you alluded to, is the other, running back. Both of those guys had been, sort of 1A, 1B at running back for Oregon for the last 4 years. So sort of an end of an era there. Um, uh, the Oregon's got a new quarterback. I think everybody knows about that. The, uh, the one that broke all of our hearts on the offense was losing tight end Spencer Webb. He unfortunately passed away in an accident over the off season. We're all sort of still in mourning about his loss. Um, and in terms of wide receivers, a couple other iconic guys, Johnny Johnson and Jalen Redd. Those guys had been, they were both seniors and had been in the program since 2017. That's when Oregon was a program that had a long, coaching continuity, and that all ended at the end of the 2016 season when they fired Mark Helfrich, and then Oregon sort of went through some drama in terms of its coaches. Willie Taggart only sticking around for a year, and then having to scramble and hire Mario Cristobal off of that staff. Johnny Johnson and Jalen Redd were guys who sort of got Oregon through that tumultuous period. So there's a lot of good feelings for those guys. And then on the defense, the it's hard to overstate the impact of Kayvon Thibodeau. As a pass rusher, he's actually surprisingly good in run blocking too. You probably shouldn't just think of him as an edge rusher, but that
Yeah,
guy was transformational. Any player who can do that to opposing offensive tackles, and I can tell you as a film reviewer, I had to write articles about this every week. Like, you can see how defenses changed their structure in order to cope with Kayvon Thibodeau. And anytime you get the offense to, like, the opposing offense, I mean, to, like, switch up what they're doing, that means they're taking a dude off the field, they're taking a tight end away from the passing game just to help double up on Thibodeau, or, they got to move a guard over, and now there's interior rush lanes open, for the inside linebackers to attack. Like, that's obviously pretty significant. And then last one that I'll mention is that Oregon basically lost all of their cornerbacks. Mikael Wright, DJ James, Jalen Davies. That's fairly significant. I think it's probably the thinnest unit that Oregon has. They have some good options to replace those guys, but it's like, it all sort of hit at once, which is, pretty significant. There are other guys I'm not mentioning who I think are beloved Ducks players, but in terms of, like, high impact guys, that'll do it.
I think you just listed those guys, right? KC being, I think, the most notable now that, you know, obviously going to the draft, whatever top five, I think it was top five pick, I believe.
Yeah.
So replicating that, right? Replicating it is going to get interesting, right? Because he's one of those players that, and it's kind of I want to say it's kind of similar to what Georgia might be going with, and trying to replace a guy like Jordan Davis, right? Because their niche on the field, right, is one that if you don't have the exact same personnel, like, you're going to have to find ways to replicate the production, right? Like, Georgia fans understand where I'm coming from this, because you don't just have a 6'6", 340-pound behemoth right now, right, on the roster to fill that gap that he did, right, to that level, whatnot, whatever the case may be. How, obviously you add some folks in, obviously, and we'll talk about the additions as well. I'm just saying some of the additions, through the portal, or finishing up the recruiting cycle from 2022, was actually impressive. It really was, considering, you basically, Dan Lanning comes in right after the end of the regular season and salvages and finishes with I want to say it was a 15 or top 15 or top 20 class,
Yeah.
according to like 24/7 composite rankings or whatever, if you will. Listen, and that just tells you if you know, obviously Georgia fans are completely aware of this. Oregon fans, if you're not, and you don't follow recruiting, the guy can recruit his ass off. Right? It's just period. He can recruit his ass off. With that being said, what are some key additions? Whether it be through the portal or through the recruiting cycle, that Oregon fans, are excited about, and maybe Georgia fans might need to take note of as well.
Um, well, I'll just run down the list. I mean, obviously they're taking a transfer quarterback, as I think 10 different schools in the Pac-12 are going to be starting transfer quarterbacks. Bo Nix, it would be really interesting to see him reunited with Kenny Dillingham, who was the OC at Auburn in 2019. When he was SEC Rookie of the Year. Um, as I said at the top, I really feel like, how Bo Nix goes. Yeah, I would be shocked if Bo Nix is not selected as a starter. Just the experience gap between he and the other two guys is just enormous. And he's pledged, this is going to be his last season, sort of works out politically, if you know what I mean, in terms of like preserving the other kids and then not transferring out. Um, at running back, they took two transfers to supplement Byron Cardwell, the returner, and Sean Dollars, who's coming off of an injury. Marquise Bucky Irving from Minnesota, who really carried them in that sort of power rushing scheme last year, and Noah Whittington, who comes over from Western Kentucky with the running backs coach Carlos Lachlan. Carlos Lachlan was a guy that like nobody knew who this guy was until he showed up last year at Western Kentucky and then this year at Oregon. But he has really whipped that room into shape, and his recruiting efforts has been incredible. I sort of think Oregon's found a real gem in Carlos Lachlan, and I'm expecting high things out of Whittington. I really don't know how the running back situation is going to go down. Like I really, any combination of those four guys, Cardwell, Dollars, Irving, and Whittington, I wouldn't be surprised at all about. I think they're all very good options, and just beats me. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Um, they took a couple of wide receivers through the transfer portal as well. Chase Cota from UCLA, who I had to do a ton of film study on UCLA over the years for obvious reasons. Chip Kelly is there, Oregon's old coach, and like boy, I can tell you that guy was really underutilized at UCLA. I'm really expecting big things from him as like very sure-handed receiver, and I really think his numbers are going to explode. Compared to just structurally the way that UCLA uses its wide receivers is I think pretty different from the way that Oregon's going to use wide receivers. They also got Caleb Chapman, who you might recall, came from the SEC, the Texas A&M. He's had a bunch of like really dramatic catches, but then he's also like struggled with injuries. So we're all wishing for his good health. On the defense, took a couple of nose tackle transfers, both of whom I think are going to be pretty significant. Taki Taimani from Washington, always good to steal a kid from Washington. And Jordan Riley from Nebraska. I think that Oregon's finally going to be deep enough at nose tackle to seriously commit to the mint front and the two gapping nose. Everybody that we're talking about here is over 310 pounds, and should be pretty good to see. I also think that they also got another defensive line transfer from Nebraska, Casey Rogers, who I think is either going to be a first or second string. As that big 4i, he's perfectly built for it. 6'5", 285. I've got some high expectations from him. And then another transfer in the cornerback room, Christian Gonzalez, snagged him from Colorado, 4-star, came over with Demetrius Martin, the cornerbacks coach. He's going to be an all Pac-12 cornerback. He's really good. I've been watching him, since he arrived as a true freshman at Colorado. I know that people don't think very highly of Colorado, but like that this one guy sort of snuck into the backfield as this really impressive cornerback. I've got high expectations for him. I think that's it in terms of impact transfers.
I was sitting there looking in the chat here. Mikey G's, I pulled it up, but I'll pull it back up again. He thought that Taki and Gonzo the biggest additions from the portal, in his opinion. But there is a good question here from our friend Kirby Visor, and he's asking who will match up. I guess this might be a decent personnel question. Who will match up against our tight end room, right? I think you're familiar with our tight end room. Listen, it's one of the deepest I've seen in a very long time in college. Period. right? Obviously, but how do you think from a personnel standpoint Oregon will match up against Bowers, Washington, Eric Gilbert, Delp when they run 13, maybe even 14 personnel sets?
I was wondering about whether they'll go to 14. I think we might see it. I don't think you're wrong about that. It, the personnel that they will probably use, from what I understand of the structure of this defense, are probably going to be the starting inside linebackers, Noah Sewell and probably Justin Flo, who are both 5 stars. And I'm really excited to see Justin Flo back to full health again.
If
In
he
tra-
if he
and
stays healthy, he's a
Yeah,
monster, a
yeah, no,
monster.
absolutely. I mean, really, we got very little film on him. I really just have one, true game, which is the opener in 2021 against Fresno State, and I mean, just absolute monster. And his technique is unrefined. Like that's him playing at maybe 80% of his effectiveness, given that he really needs to like refine a lot of his technique, which I hope that he's been working on during this long recuperation period. And then in terms of the OLB, I would expect Mace Funa, the OLB, to be the primary guy who's sort of dropping back and covering. How they actually perform against Georgia's elite tight ends, beats me. I hope well, but like those are the guys that you're going to see. They certainly have all the athletic talent that they need in order to be effective, but like it's a over the course of the season in pass coverage, because I know that this defensive structure really emphasizes using linebackers in pass coverage, and like allocate your resources to stop the pass, because that hurts you more than the run does in modern college football. But like how they actually do in this game against elite tight ends, I don't know. It's gonna be tough.
Let's just say this: Week one, right? This game, don't if you're an Oregon fan and you have issues, guarding the tight ends or whatever. Listen, don't say that oh, our linebacking core, it needs a lot of help, because I'm telling you right now, on your schedule, which we'll talk to after another break here in a little bit. Listen, outside of that right there, you're set, because you're not going to see anything remotely close to what you'll see in week one, from a tight end perspective, right? And as Mikey G says right here, he predicts that he thinks that you'll see Jamal Hill and Sewell covering, Brock Bowers, but really don't know what Tosh and Dan will come up with. Obviously you need size a little bit, but you have to have some athleticism as well. And I'm telling you right now, if there's any one person that you would need to understand and scheme against that right there, he's your head coach. So I'm going to leave it at there. It's simple as
Yeah,
that.
I mean, he's had to face this offense in practice a lot. I just finished up my Georgia film study, and I'm writing up my article actually today. It's going up tomorrow morning on Tuesday. Um, and I really feel like a lot of SEC defensive coordinators were really strategically miscalculating where the strengths and weaknesses of Georgia's offense was. And I will detail that more in my article, but the short version of it is like, yes, you're absolutely right. Contain Brock Bowers and kind of forget everything else. Um,
Easier said than done, too.
yeah, I mean, obviously that's true. Mikey in comments makes a good remark, which is that Jamal Hill might be a guy that because they do like to split the tight ends out quite a bit, and like, yeah, I would expect a big body guy like Jamal Hill, that the starting nickel, who I think is actually from your neck of the woods, to be at least a physical matchup. Like that is a big guy, bigger than I usually expect to see safeties at, and that should be a good matchup too. I mean, that's really sort of the really interesting thing about studying Monken's offense, is that they do a lot out of 12 personnel, but it's not, two on the ball tight ends. It's spreading them out. It's, dropping one back as an H back. It's, putting guys into motion. There's even some sweep plays with tight ends. Like
Mhm.
it's a very
If,
inventive
if
offense. So
Oregon fans, sorry to cut you off, my man,
go
but
ahead.
Oregon fans, I promise you, he mentioned a sweep play, right? And I'm going to let you know, if you didn't see what happened last season, Brock Bowers is athletic enough to take a jet sweep for a touchdown. If you don't believe me, just go Google it. I guarantee you'll find it. Right? You go to YouTube and just type in Brock Bowers jet sweep, or you know, I promise you, he's that athletic. But I do want to ask you a question though. And kind of alluding back earlier, right, with this 13 personnel, maybe even 14 personnel. The thing that's interesting to me is if you add a 13 personnel, I feel like 13 personnel in particular is the most difficult to scheme against because of the not only the athletic ability of our tight end room, right? But the uncertainty that can come with it. Because if you put in, say, for instance, hypothetically thinking, you have Brock Bowers, you have Darnell Washington, you have Eric Gilbert. You have both out wide, you have one on end, or say you move Brock Bowers and Darnell on the end and then slide, maybe Eric to the slot or whatever. You can still run out of that and be effective because ultimately, if it's a run play, you would have seven right to your five. So, having this amount of tight end personnel is even more scary than receiving depth to a certain degree because of the ability to block from a tight end position, right? Like, you're not going to see a true receiver play from out wide, come into the end of the line and do that. You're not just going to. So this 13 personnel, it's going to be extremely interesting to see if we run that. I don't know if we live out of 13 personnel, even though we might be able to. I think you'll see it a few times for sure. It's going
They
to
were
be
definitely
interesting to see this.
transitioning to a lot more 13 towards the end of the year. That was actually one of the things that I really picked up from charting the teams, like dealing with Pickens' injury and then just sort of realizing what they had in Bowers. And then as Washington sort of came online, recovered from his foot injury, that they were switching, it was a lot of 11 and 12 to start the year, and it was a lot of 12 and 13 to end the year. Like I think Munkin's hearing you loud and clear about the possibilities of 13.
I would think so, right? But I think what it boils down to is you have your linebacking core that can have to go out and cover these guys, but it can also play a role into your defensive line in a sense because, like I said, you have to stop the run. And Mikey G is bringing up a point here as well, right? We look at Oregon's offensive line as being, returning a lot of guys from last season, and talking about, I see some chatter here, the Oregon Utah game, finding out that the O line was dinged up and everything, which is kind of expected considering the whole season going on right there. I do think that seeing if you're 100%, if you will, right for this week, it's going to be interesting because, like I said, Georgia's defense, we lost a lot of starter talent, right? We're still extremely deep, just more talent than experience, if you will. So I think looking at a matchup, I'm excited to see is those two really trench play, right? We can talk all day about quarterback play, receiving, and skill positions, and that's fine and dandy. But I think ultimately you could see this game play go down to trench play and who wins the line of scrimmage because listen, Bo Nix, we've seen him 3 years, right, at Oregon. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's going to be the same Bo Nix from Oregon. I just can't do that.
You mean
We've
at Auburn?
seen, but sorry, yes, my bad. Wow, him at Auburn was one thing, right? He had Dillingham his freshman year, and listen, that was his best year. But at the same time, what Georgia is going to see with him at Oregon is going to be a lot different because, in my opinion, listen, he just has better personnel overall, right? With him at Oregon, it was
I,
just a
I
lot to
really
see
could you
last year.
more. I mean, I figure I don't have to work too hard on a Georgia podcast to convince people that Auburn sucks. But I had to study Auburn a lot over the last several years. Oregon opened with them in 2019. I did a bunch of film study on Joe Moorhead, who was coaching at Mississippi State for a couple of years. So I was watching Auburn in there. A lot of the new coaching staff comes from the SEC. So I put together a bunch of film over Auburn over the years, and the thing that sort of astonished me was that for an SEC team, I was sort of gobsmacked by how poor their offensive line play was, and by just their refusal to recruit more than one wide receiver at any given time. And that's just not the situation that Bo Nix is walking into at Oregon. And I mean, I'm not saying that I think that Gus Malzahn or Brian Harsin was trying to sabotage Bo Nix, although hiring Chad Morris and Mike Bobo might be evidence of that. But if you're trying to make your quarterback look bad, then have a bad offensive line and poor wide receiver depth and hire Mike Bobo would probably be how I would set about doing it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, now, listen, and like I said, what we saw, Bo Nix was very hit or miss at his time at Auburn. Now, for Georgia's perspective, Georgia caused nightmares for 3 years. I'm just going to leave it there, right? But also thinking about it this way, when you look at what Bo Nix has to deal with, right? Like, there's some takeaways from from his time at Auburn, and I'm not knocking Oregon here, but is there a Tank Bigsby there, right? He had Tank Bigsby at Auburn to kind of be the crutch because Tank Bigsby was the guy, right? He doesn't have Tank Bigsby there. He does have some good running backs. Oregon does have some good running backs. I'm not going to say no on that. But I'm telling you right now, my key here to obviously offensive line play. Listen, he's going to have a lot more stability, from a protection standpoint, and he's also going to have, in my opinion, receivers that will be able to catch the ball and sustain drives and score touchdowns. Because last season, it was interesting to see because there were several drives that stopped 3 and outs because receivers in their hands got dropped. Period. Just got dropped. Touchdown, wide open touchdown, dropped it. Right, and it's just one of those things that like I don't see that happening. I just don't see it happening at Oregon. Now, with that being said, we are going to welcome our man Juan Daniels. Juan is here for the show. Welcome, Juan. Welcome, sir. I'm
What's
glad
going
you
on?
were not much. So we were talking Bo Nix and the differences that we think we'll be seeing with him at Oregon, comparing that to what his time was at Auburn. Do you have any thoughts on what differences and things like that you'll see from Bo Nix with his time at Oregon now?
I think you'll see a more mature Bo Nix. You sit there and look at it, and it starts with the head coach. And Auburn was in disarray. Harsin, I mean, just had the group in disarray. The coach before that was just in disarray. You're going to have somebody, number one, that is defensive minded and Coach Lanning. And he's just going to ask Bo Nixon, hey, I need you to be mature. I need you to make good decisions. You can't just go out there and be wild and crazy with the ball. So, I think once that happens, he's going to settle in, and I think you'll see a different Bo Nix.
Hithlow, what do you think, my man? Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Well, or at least I'll put it this way: everything that Bo Nix needs to succeed is in place. Whether he actually, takes that step, that's you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink kind of deal, But in terms of having an offensive line that will give him, better protection, I think that's in place. Having wide receivers who can actually catch the ball and tight ends. That's the other thing. Is Oregon has a couple of very promising tight ends, and Maliki Madavow and Terrence Ferguson. Watch out for those guys. They were true freshmen last year, but really lit it up. He's got an offensive coordinator who he knows and likes working with, and was, his best performance was with Kenny Dillingham. Um, you know, uh, all of these things are in place. Now, will he actually take that step? Remains to be seen. But in terms of the offense that I expect to see, yeah, it's a lot of stuff that's going to be pretty familiar to him too. A lot of RPOs, a lot of reading the linebackers, that sort of stuff. And so, the idea that like, well, Bo Nix is a career 120 NCAA passer rating, quarterback, and so therefore he's going to stink at Oregon. Like, I don't think you can say that. I don't think that's a safe assumption at all.
Obviously, I think listen. I think one guy that I think is really going to benefit from having Bo Nix. Listen, let's not forget here, Ty Thompson, right? In y'all spring game, both guys looked really good, really sharp, right? I think at that point, like you have the idea that Bo Nix is going to be the guy just based off the context, but Ty Thompson showed a lot of flashes too, and even was it but is it
Yeah, Jay
Butter?
Butterfield.
Butterfield, yeah, I didn't want to butcher the name. I was, but yeah, I mean, you take overall quarterback play. I think is getting better, right? I do. Um, and listen, I'm gonna take a jab here because I'm not pandering, but I just want to take a jab. The fact that you had Justin Herbert and you had Anthony Brown, right, under Mario Cristobal, and the fact that they underwhelmed the way they did, in my opinion, at Oregon, for them to go and do what they're doing now in the NFL. Listen, I don't think you see the same kind of quarterback play that you saw under Cristobal. I just don't see it. I really don't.
Well, that's been my, I put my finger on that a little while ago. Is I really don't think that. I know Murray Cristobal was the quarterback's coach, but I think he just like, I think he failed to recognize that his quarterback coaching was not very good, and failed to make a change, because he made a change like every other position coach. Like he's like Dr. dropping people into lakes of fire. You failed me for the last time. And it just didn't do that with his quarterbacks coaches. And I don't know why that is, but at any rate, it's in the past. I do think that Kenny Dillingham has a pretty, wrote a whole art. Actually, I wrote 2 articles about Kenny Dillingham. One trying to figure out what kind of offensive structure that'll run, and another like evaluating him as a quarterbacks coach. And like, I was actually way more happy with him as a quarterbacks coach. Like if anybody's going to get a good performance out of Nix or Thompson or Butterfield, that should be an improvement over the quarterbacks coaching that was going on in Oregon over the last 4 years. Yeah, to have some pretty high degree of confidence in Dillingham in doing that.
So I'm gonna read out a question. I think this, and Gerard Berry asked a good question. I don't know if he means just for us Georgia fans, kind of give us our take on this, or he's talking about you, Hith. But the question is, what style of offense do you guys expect from Oregon? Obviously a new staff, really. Obviously head coach, offensive coordinator, and the QB that we'll be facing, right? I think what you're going to have to see is kind of similar to what we saw at Dillingham's time at Florida State. I'm not going to say that's exactly what you're going to see, but if I'm looking at that right there, I think what you have to really keep in mind for is, Dillingham has a mobile quarterback. I think you're going to see him try to utilize that, right? So I think you're going to see, I would say somewhat of a balance. I think you see a little bit more passing than you do, running. But I do think you'll see some designed runs, honestly, quarterback runs. Utilize your quarterback, get him into space, try to create mismatches and defensive lapses, right? A lot of movement. You're going to see a lot of movement, in my opinion, right? Motions all over the place, things like that, right? To try to distract you from the fact that you might see, right, Bo Nix slide out or whatever the case may be. So I think you're going to see a little bit of similar to what you saw when Gus Malzahn was at Auburn as well. You saw a lot of just motion and chaos, right, before the play. Now, I'm not going to say that's what it's going to be, but in my opinion, I think that's what you could see. I do think you'll see some passing. I think you have to utilize some big receivers. Coda, Kyler Casper might, in my opinion, might be a name that you might see utilized because the dude is just huge. He's huge. he's just big. But I think you're going to have to see if I'm Georgia and I'm playing on the defense. My opinion, I think you have to make sure you set the edge appropriately. Play right, contain, keep your contain. That's just my opinion there. Juan, what would you say if in regards to the offense that you're expecting if you had to make a choice now?
Yeah, I'm expecting. Again, Lanning has a formula as far as what it's going to take to win offensively, and he's got the right guys in place. People don't understand, like, Bo Nix is a really, really good quarterback. And we're talking about a guy that's beat Alabama and he's beat some of the top teams. He's just one of those things that, can he be corralled and can he play within the offense? If Bo Nix plays within the offense, Oregon is going to be tough. And I expect to see some passing, some running, a well-balanced. And then Bo Nix is also going to have the opportunity to make plays. It's just kind of like Stetson Bennett did last year. A lot of people didn't realize Stetson Bennett made a lot of plays with his feet, but he also made some smart plays. So can Bo Nix, channel that his inner Stetson Bennett, so to speak, and make really good, smart decisions. And if that's the case, they're going to be pretty good.
Absolutely. Here's what you got, my man.
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I have fairly high expectations of Nix with better personnel around him, and I think the Dillingham sort of knows, like, well, I'm expecting to see pretty RPO heavy offense simply because there's so many tools, right? Like, it's not like there's only one guy who can catch the ball. You can throw it to running backs and to tight ends and to slot receivers and to outside receivers, and and nobody's going to understand the defense to sort of help them plan for okay, so how are they going to react if we motion this guy, etc. Like having Dan Lanning in the offense's corner, I think is helpful as well. But back to Gerard's question, I think there's an asymmetry here in terms of the film that's available to prep, right? Like, Oregon's coaching staff studying Georgia's offense and defense sort of knows what they're going to get on September 3rd, right? Like, there is some personnel replacement, particularly on the defense front, but like, they know what the offensive and defense is going to be. They know what the tendencies are. They know who the main personnel are. They know the sort of reactions and so forth. Like, Georgia studying Oregon's film, like, Lanning's never been a before. Dillingham has never control over an offense before. At least I don't think so. We haven't seen how Nix is going to be with this. Others. We obviously have a bunch of film on Nix. We don't know how we're going to do with a different set of offensive line and tight ends and wide receivers, and so, that sort of asymmetry is interesting. We're all guessing about what Georgia's going to see out of Oregon because Georgia's going to be guessing about what they're going to see out of Oregon.
I think the only thing, and I want to transition into the schedule aspect of things, but before we do that, I do want to add one final thing. And I think what's going to be interesting, if I'm Georgia, right, I think you have to take into context, it's a multitude of things, right? Tendencies that you saw with, Dillingham in his time at, right, Florida State, time at Auburn, right? It's harder to game plan, you know what I mean? I just think that ultimately, right, you have to, if you're Georgia, you have to have trust and faith in Kirby Smart and the coaching staff, right? Listen, we've had all off season to prepare in a sense, to get physically ready, as game shape ready. You develop, right, the development. Juan, you're 100% familiar with this, obviously being a former player. There's so much growth that happens in between, seasons, right? You have to trust Kirby and his development. Listen, you still got Glenn Schumann, which Glenn Schumann, in my opinion, is arguably the best, on the staff. I love Dan Lanning, but I loved Glenn Schumann just a little bit more. Just what he's able to do. So obviously there's some new things that Georgia's having to adjust for. But I'm telling you right now, ultimately this is going to be a very interesting game. Knowing Lanning and knowing Kirby, it's going to be a chess match, and there's no question about it. Listen, not a single question about it. It's going to be a chess match. But we're going to take a quick break, and on the flip side of that break, we're talking Oregon's schedule. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're going to jump into this. Hith, I want to start with you first. Obviously, let's break down the schedule here. We'll break it down 6 games at a time, and kind of want to get a feel for, right, the overall feeling of Oregon's season. Right, you have a lot of hype, a lot of momentum. I think, right, looking from the Pac-12 perspective. You had USC with Lincoln Riley hiring there. Listen, they loaded up through the portal. You obviously had Utah, which can Oregon avenge this? We'll see. But we're going to go ahead and start with the schedule, and I want to break down the first 6 games here. So obviously you start off week one. Neutral site, right? I'm gonna say neutral site in air quotes if you're not saying listen, air quotes. Neutral site, which I don't even care for neutral sites, but obviously Georgia to start off. Then you have Eastern Washington, I think at home, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And then the third week is going to be interesting. BYU comes to town, all right, and then Washington State. You go to Washington State. Juan, this is something that you'll probably keep an eye out for. Stanford will come to town, all right, come to Eugene on October 1st, and then you go to Arizona, right? I think this is an interesting first 6 games. I'm looking at week one and week three being the most interesting to me. Obviously, I think Georgia and Oregon is going to be a really good matchup. If I'm looking here, though, I think you go 5-1. I think Oregon goes 5-1 going into this bye week here. Obviously, I think the loss to Georgia, and it's like I said, this loss is not going to be right. I don't see it being a season-defining loss by any means. It's just one of these things where I expect it to be a good game. I just think that Georgia pulls away at the end, right? And it's like I said, it's no knock to anything, but outside of that, I think the game against BYU is going to be interesting, and I think you pull that out as well. Juan, obviously we have that connection here with Juan. So Juan's son Ashton is a freshman quarterback at Stanford, so that game has probably a little bit more meaning today for Juan in talking about that than in other games. I'll let Hith start first, and then I'm gonna bring it to Juan. Overall, those first 6 games, what do you see there, and how do you predict things for the first half of the season?
Yeah, at this point, I think it would be foolish to go too hard against Vegas and bet on Oregon to take the opener. But for the rest of the really for the rest of the season, Oregon's the most talented team in the Pac-12, and certainly is more talented than Eastern Washington. BYU is always a tricky team because they're made up of so many like two stars and walk-ons, but it is a well-coached team nonetheless. Simply from a talent perspective, Oregon shouldn't, run into a whole lot of struggles until they play Utah, which is, another team that punches way above their rating. The, they have Wazoo and Arizona are always tricky road trips. They're not particularly talented team, although Jed Fish has sort of stepped up the talent level at Arizona. It's been an impressive talent transformation. They're just not done yet. They need a couple other years to really be a contender, keeping up this pace. But anyway, playing in Pullman and playing in Tucson has been sort of like, oh my God, experiences for the Ducks over the years, but at least the weather should be cooperative. It's getting, Pullman in late September is way better than Pullman in late November. I can tell you that. And Arizona in October is better than Arizona in September. So I'm feeling fairly good about those teams. Stanford should be a revenge game to end all revenge games. That game was let's just say unusual, had an unusual ending last year. And I don't think the returning players on the Duck squad are going to forget it. It would be interesting if we saw Ashton Daniels playing quarterback for Stanford. I don't think it's going to happen, but best of luck to him.
Juan, I'm gonna let you take over. Do you need me to pull the? I'm gonna pull the graphic back up just to help out. But what are your thoughts on Oregon's first half of the season?
Oh yeah, I mean that's that first game is always going to be tough. What makes me nervous as a Georgia fan, just what made me nervous last year with Brent Venables having an entire summer and an entire time to scheme. I just see that that's going to be tough in the beginning. But like you said, there's a strong possibility that we pull that one out. Eastern Washington, that's going to be a beat down. And just like he said with BYU, it's not just the two stars and walk-ons, but also too is that it's an older team. A lot of those players have gone on missions, and so they're a lot older. So again, you never know what's going to happen. Stanford, Stanford's going to go up there. I'm actually going to be at that game, so I'm actually pretty excited. Stanford probably goes and wins 63-3. So that's a Patrick shout out. No. Realistically, going and playing in Eugene, I heard is just an absolute nightmare. So I'll give the nod to Oregon unless Ashton gets in, and now things change. But I see them going 5-1 in the first one, and then again, like I said, that first game, depending on how it goes, how Bo Nix plays, it could be a trap game for Georgia. So. I would say right now at this point 5-1.
Yeah. So any Oregon fans in the chat or you're listening, and you heard Juan say 60-33, please understand it's an ongoing thing here for the show. So keep that in mind. It's okay. I guarantee you had some people sweating for a second. Think we might need to admit Juan to the loony bin or something. But no,
like Desmond Howard needs to be admitted to the loony bin.
I'm not mad at all. I'm not mad at all about that take, Juan. I'm not. that's a whole nother. Listen, that right there, that take right there could cause its own episode. In all seriousness, but listen. So let's go ahead and jump in real fast to the back half, right? So we'll pull the graphic back up for those watching. So after Arizona, right, you come back, you're on a bye week, and then you host UCLA and Chip Kelly, and I think that's an interesting game, which we'll talk about in just a second. Then you host Cal, or you go to Cal, right? Take trips to Cal and to like Colorado is going to be extremely cold even in November, but we'll see. Then comes the game, right? Then comes the game. These great value dogs, if you will, Washington Huskies, come to Eugene, and then the revenge game. And I think this on the back half is no doubt the biggest game of the season for you, on at least on the back half. Utah comes to town, right? And I think, listen, what happened twice last year. I think that's not going to sleep well with any Oregon fan. And listen, I think you might want to see Oregon come out for blood against the Utes. And then you finish up the season, if I'm not mistaken, Civil War with a trip to Oregon State. And I feel like that's going to be a very, very cold game. Um, Overall, I'm looking at this back half right here. I think you go, oof. You know what? Call me crazy. I saw in the chat that they always slip up in Arizona. I don't see that happening this year because you only got Arizona. I think you take down Utah at home. So give me a straight flush for the back half. Give me 6-0 in the back half. I'll give you the 11-1. I could see it. Now at the same time, I do understand that there's also that chance that you might slip up at a game. You might lose to Utah, right? Like, and I've seen Oregon situations, right? Like last year to Stanford, where you had a game that you should win, but you don't. New regime, right? New regime. There's a culture change, things like that. I'm optimistic here on the Ducks. I'm going 11-1. Call me crazy. Call me crazy. I think you go 11-1. I think you get revenge on Utah. You do. Even with Cam Rising there, listen, Devin Lloyd was an X factor last season, and I'm just curious to see how they replace that. So give me Oregon at 11-1, right? Going to the Pac-12 championship, in my opinion, to take on USC. Hith, what would you say about that back half?
Well, I tell you what, I like that the three tough games are all at home. Oregon is 28-2 at home over the last 5 years. And as you know, is a very difficult place to play. And as you say, Utah is the mother of all revenge games. The I like the Ducks odds. Getting all three of those home games. I don't think highly Cal and Colorado this year. Oregon State's always a game throughout the record books. No, for real. Like Oregon, you might think that Oregon, dominates that series. It is not true. Like over the last 20 years, it's like pretty close to tied. The home team usually wins. Oregon State was undefeated at home last year. It's a tough little team. But on paper, Oregon should be 6-0 against this back half. You know what? That would require Oregon going 9-0 in the Pac-12, and that has literally never happened. So, boy, I don't know. I don't know about making that prediction. I actually think it's more likely that Oregon has some dumb slip-up game, like against at Pullman or at Tucson, and then cruises in the back, or not cruises, but like manages to win out. After that dumb slip-up game, I'm going with 10-2. I think that's the. If you're asking me for a full season prediction, I would say they're going to split Georgia and Utah. And they're going to have one dumb loss, just slap your forehead. What the hell was that? Kind of loss, because Oregon's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
They're not quite at, like, they're recruiting very well. They're definitely improving the program year over year. Like I'm very optimistic about what this program is going to be in 4 or 5 years time. But like they're still not quite at that like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State type of level where it's like it's nothing but 5 stars. You should expect them to go 12-0 every year. If they lose a game, it's shocking. Like Oregon's just not there yet. They're at least one notch below that. So like one dumb slip up game. Yeah. I'm fairly certain Oregon's going to have now. Don't ask me where that's going to be. By definition, it's a dumb slip up game. So I can't predict, where it's going to be, but yeah, I'm fairly confident it's going to happen.
I think Gerard says here that he has Oregon going 9-3 with losses to Georgia, BYU, and Utah. And while I do see that, right? I also think that I think Oregon is going to be disciplined to the point where you might not be familiar with it almost because, like I said, I think you're bringing in a championship pedigree with Dan Lanning, right? Just coming off of a national championship, you can't tell me that he wouldn't know exactly what it takes, right? Now, the culture should be balled in almost immediately, right? I feel as if that's the case, but I also understand that, like I said, I might be super, high on Oregon, right? Going 11-1, especially with a first year coach. I get that. But I just think that you have the discipline, and I think by the time that you play them, also playing at home could help you win those key matchups, right? The hardest ones on paper that it looks like, right? Against Utah, right? Against BYU at home. Do I think you lose? I think you lose to Georgia, and that's understandable and that's respectable at that point. The thing about it is, when you start to look at these games, I think, what could have happened with Oregon in the past could be that lack of focus, that lack of discipline in times. And I'm telling you right now, if you have Dan Lanning as your head coach, he is a no nonsense guy. He's a player's guy, but he understands when to take it serious and keep you focused. So that, in my opinion, is why I am so high on Oregon. Like I said, I do see that you could lose that Utah game, right? There's always that question. Juan, we're going to take it over to you though. That back half, what are your projections on that?
Um, I see them being 5-1 on the back half. I mean, I don't see them having any issues with anybody except for Utah. Utah, they tasted blood with that whole Ohio State thing. They really felt like, you know what, they should have won that game. Utah's on a different level. I see Utah going 12-0 and being in the college football championship. That's one of my predictions. But so for that, and that just means that for Oregon, 11-2 in a Rose Bowl. I don't think that any of those fans are going to complain about that. But Utah right now is just too tough. I mean, they really are. But I do agree with you with Dan Lanning. I mean, he's got that championship mentality. He's going to turn that program around, and they're going to start believing either you're elite or not. And and it starts with the head coach. He's got that championship pedigree. I think that's going to be important for Oregon's future. But that game, Cam Rising and Utah, they're just going to be tough. The only team that can beat Utah, after they murder Florida and everybody else, is probably going to be Stanford. And I said it.
Hey, no one predicted Stanford winning last year. If Oregon's got a dumb slip-up game in them, then picking Stanford to be it, like, yeah, okay. They had a dumb slip-up game at home in
Stanford have a
2018.
ridiculous tight end room?
Not at this point, not really.
I felt like
That's actually been a big part of their decline over the last 5 years or so. Is they're basically they lost all their tight end prospects to Arkansas. Like Arkansas took an entire family from them, and Stanford's got other problems than that. But they've got one or two good tight ends. Yeah, but if you're remembering the heyday of them where they had a bunch of totally undefendable tight ends, those days are over.
I got you.
If Stanford goes 500, that's a win. I mean, they've got them picked 5 and 7 right now. So if they go 500, that's a win.
Listen, Ashton and that Buford pedigree, he's going to be fine. He'll be fine. Just going to leave that there. Hey, but guys, so obviously we talked a lot about Oregon, right? We've talked about the pulse of the program. We've talked about key personnel additions, departures, right, and obviously schematics as well from the coaching staff. We've talked about the schedule. We broke it down. There's a potential that you could possibly see Oregon in the Pac-12 championship year one under Dan Lanning. Even who knows, right? We'll have to see how things play out, right? But I think there's some key matchups there that we've talked about, right? The Georgia game obviously being the one that we're focused on right now. The Utah game, revenge tour, right? Stanford could be the possible upset per one. There's just a lot we've discussed. But I want to give a shout out to Hith for coming on and talking this preseason, or obviously talking about Oregon for us with us. Thank you for coming on. With that being said, if people want to find out about your work and find out more about you, where can people find you?
I'm the managing editor for the site addictedtoquack.com.
I like that.
And yes, I can't claim credit for it, but it is perhaps the best website title of all time, Addicted to Quack. And you can find me on Twitter at Hythloday1. That's spelled HYTHLODAY, the number 1.
So I got to do this one. He brought up, Addicted to Quack, and obviously it kind of has a subliminal reference there. But there's somebody that I'm familiar with one back in the day, and I think you might be knowing where I'm going with this. But there was a famous addict, if you will, called Tyrone. You can call him, but I don't know.
Tyrone Biggums.
People. So obviously the folks understand. We made one laugh again today. Hith, thanks again, like I said, coming on. And listen, dog fans, we know it's game week. We're prepping for this. But I'm telling you right now, there's some very informative stuff there over at Addicted to Quack. Listen, if I'm not mistaken, I know, like I said, like you mentioned earlier, Hith, I was over there Friday on the, talking. Is that available yet, or if so, when will it be? Or if not, when will it be?
Adam should have that up by Tuesday morning. Hell, it may be up right
Okay.
now. If I'm not, my article is going to be going on Georgia, in which I run down the entire roster. Is going up on Tuesday, and Robert, our interview was a big part of that. You sent me straight in a couple of questions, and you get a bunch of shout outs in the article. So you might want to read it just for a little, ego satisfaction.
I mean, I ain't gonna do that. I'm not gonna humble brag or anything, but no, it's listen, it's always fun to talk Georgia football. So any chance I get, I'll do that. You know how that goes. Um, hey, listen, I wanted to give a shout out to the brigade coming in hot and heavy. Listen, and Mikey G, I'm telling you right now, this show is it's very right. It's very, you don't know what you get, right? Forrest Gump once said that it's like a box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're gonna get, and that's what's gonna happen in the DGD podcast. Just leaving that there. Especially for a first time viewer, right? But if you enjoyed what you liked, right? If you're on YouTube or Facebook, make sure you like and subscribe. With that being said, though, Oregon fans that hopped into the chat in the brigade, obviously the honorary brigadiers for today, listen, outside of September 3rd, I hope y'all have a good season. I really wish y'all the best this season, except for September 3rd, because, listen, as Jack Jenkins said, don't take this ass whipping personally. But neither here nor there. Neither here nor there. Listen, obviously, like I said, obviously, I want Dan Lanning. I want Oregon to do well. I don't have any ill will towards that, but it's game one, right? It's just the way that is. Any final words, Juan, before we wrap this thing up, my man?
No, man. Hey, we're 5 days away. It's here.
Oh my
It's
God,
here.
Keely Ringo days away. I love it. God, that just brings back flashback to Indy, don't it, Juan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's repeat season. Nah, run it back is what I'm ready for. Hith, like I said, man, thanks for again for coming on. I'm glad you were able to hop on and do the home and home, man. But on that note, folks, have a great day. Oh, and listen, get ready for week one. It is coming. It's coming. On that note, go dogs. Have a great day.
Go Dogs.